Today, we're with John Ellsworth with Success Strategies. John, your latest column describes dairy farmers and business owners, for that matter, who might be dealing with real cash flow problems and they just feel stuck, unable to make a decision about making changes. Talk a little bit about that situation.
Well, Joel, I think good morning and glad to be here with you. I would suggest that that's sort of an element of the industry, or it's a byproduct of what we've seen the last 4 years. Cash flow has been really tough, tight, low milk prices in the overall sense. And unfortunately, as you well know, and same in your life and mine, none of the fixed costs are none of them are static either. They're on the increase as well. So when you get a squeeze on the revenue side and the fixed costs stay the same or go higher, it makes for some difficult cash flow. And I think people are having trouble making some decisions simply because there's so much uncertainty. It used to be a given that you could find financing or refinancing with banks, but the banks have been they've gotten to the point where they're a little bit scared too, and at best cautious. And can we blame them? I don't think so. I think they've done what they can for the most part. But even those people that are getting the renewals done for their loans, excuse me, are actually, it's taking longer. There's some real caution in the process. So I think the combination of the tighter cash flows, the slower loan renewals, or lack of financing being available for some people it's created some paralysis. People are saying, geez, I've never dealt with situations like this, so I don't quite know how to handle that. And
well, John, in your column, you talk about some concrete steps that a dairy farmer, business owner can take to kind of deal with that situation where it's just hard to know how to move forward. Talk a little bit about the strategy that you outlined.
Okay. It's really pretty simple. There's 4 quadrants. And so if you can do this at home, you can take a sheet of paper and do this. But this actually comes from Dan Sullivan, founder of the Strategic Coach organization, who is one of my business coaches and been a great help to me in my own business. But Dan has a saying that, quote, and this is a quote of his, all progress begins with telling the truth. And the reality is that's what we need to do. When there are a million things going wrong, or it seems like a million things, clarity is what you really need. And so this little process of identifying, if you take this sheet of paper, split it in 4 quadrants, the top left, you list the dangers, which are things you could possibly lose. The top right, we list obstacles, which are things that are keeping you stuck, if you will, things that we can't seem to overcome. The bottom left, we list weaknesses, which are things you're lacking, things I could do better if I had this, for example. And then the bottom right, we list the setbacks, kind of like a SWOT analysis, as you and I had talked previously. But the setbacks in the bottom right corner are things you've actually have lost, such as profitability. And so what you do initially is a quick, I call it a brain drain. You basically list the primary dangers, primary obstacles, the primary weaknesses, and the primary setbacks. And then from the list under each of those 4, you pick the one item in each quadrant that, and oftentimes they're very interrelated, that you need to focus on. What's most important of those 4 quadrants, of each item in those 4 quadrants.
And as you assess those, do you try to rank them, or does it become kind of obvious where you have to start? Because getting started sometimes is the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I have 5 problems, for example. Which one do the key is to list them all. And then I think it's sort of self-intuitive that when you look at your list of 2 items, 5 items, whatever, in each of those 4 quadrants, you'll be able to identify as a business person. It doesn't mean necessarily dairy business, but any business. I use it in my own, that you take those and you'll identify the most significant, the primary one you need to focus on. And remember, the whole process is built around unparalyzing our thinking. So, and you know, and I know, everyone knows, when you have a lot of problems on your hand all at one time, you can just become overwhelmed, so to speak. And I think the key is you unparalyze your thinking by focusing on the one item in each of those 4 quadrants that's most important, and then realize that things need to be changed. So one of the things, the whole reason for doing this is you have to ask yourself, well, gee, I got my 4 primary items identified. What can I do with them? And oftentimes I find, like I listed low milk price as a danger, the primary danger, but it could be things like low feed inventory, reproductive problems. But I circled low milk prices, which led to my primary obstacle of weak cash flow. I also listed things like not having a generational plan for the next generation to come in, but that's probably not as significant up front as weak cash flow. The weaknesses was things we're lacking, a feed line that's maybe the balance is greater than your inventory, which is never a good thing to be in with a bank. They call it being upside down on your feed line. It's not a fun situation, but maybe the need for additional financing. That could be my primary weakness that I'm lacking. And ultimately, all those things, the low milk price, the weak cash flow, and the need for financing have all impacted my profitability. And so the thing that I think we then have to go on to do is focus on, ask ourselves, what can I do with this information? I freed my thinking up a little bit. Now, what can I do with it in my particular business? And it's going to be a little different for everybody, but I think it's crucial that people are able to focus in on those items. I use the example of Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of Auschwitz, the vilest concentration camp during World War II. And one of the things he observed was Viktor Frankl said that his actual survival depended on the realization that his old life is over. And it's not a life and death situation in the dairy industry, but I think we need to use some similar thinking. We can't run our businesses going forward like we did 20 years ago. We need to spend more time planning and working on the business instead of just in the business. Because while as a dairyman, I may not be the marketer of my milk particularly, I still need to be involved in all processes, all activities of the industry. And so hopefully that makes sense. And that's the reason I think people need to focus in on this quadrant to identify their primary dangers, obstacles, weaknesses, and setbacks that they've actually have had happen.
Well, John, thank you. We hope that information will help some folks as they deal with today's dairy economy. I'm speaking today with John Ellsworth of Success Strategies. He's a regular columnist in DairyBusiness.com. John, thank you for being with us. This is Joel Hastings for DairyBusiness.com.
Thank you, Joel.